At the end of the last World Cup, I did a power ranking on the teams, and I had India at 5, I think, or somewhere. They were ahead of South Africa, and people were upset. Indians were upset that I was not selecting their team more because they were quite unhappy, and non-Indians were upset and accused me of sucking up to India.
This is the last knot. My dad told me to say this.
But what I was really trying to do was take a look at the players and the setup of the team and then try and project how they would go in the following World Cup. And although India had been poor, there was nothing fundamentally wrong with that team itself. Perhaps it's a bit anchor heavy, although that's probably ended up turning out quite well for them. And I also said that Australia got lucky and that may not happen again. And look at what we have seen 1 year on. The Australian top order had a poor World Cup and their seamers never got going either. And the Australian team should be even maybe slightly stronger than it was last time. But really the main difference is that they just didn't play as well. And last time they did. However, they ended up losing the same amount of games in the first round as they did last time. So what was the big difference? Well, the washout against England meant that they had fewer points. Now, they might have lost that game anyway, and I don't know, they might not have. Looking at how England handled the MCG pitch earlier, Australia certainly had a pretty good chance. But right now, the Australian team is seen as bad, and last time they were seen as really good. And the difference is rain and form, as far as I can tell. Because Mitchell Starc went for 10,000 runs in that last World Cup final, but the Australians could cover him at that time. This time they couldn't, and he had to be dropped. But no one wants to hear that kind of stuff after a tournament. They want to hear that the successful team was great, and that the sides who struggled were awful. But there wasn't much really between India and Australia in that last World Cup. Even if India didn't make the finals at all. There's probably not that much between them right now either, even if India would go on to win this tournament. And when I started thinking about it in this sort of way, India's the team that really came to mind. Because I'm pretty sure they had a better team last World Cup than they do this time. I just find it hard to believe that this team from the last tournament is not better than their current one. The top 6 is basically the same. Hardik has changed batting personalities in between, and we've had more DK this time. But all in all, it's pretty similar to what we saw in the last World Cup. Even if Akshar Patel had been in good form, which he hadn't, he's clearly not Sir Ravi. And he just doesn't have the same kind of batting impact or depth or flexibility that Ravi does. And I also don't think he's as clever as a bowler, although he does have slightly different strengths when you look at that. Ashwin played 3 matches last time and he's played more this time, despite the fact that these conditions favour spin bowling less. And Varun Chakravarti was the other spinner, and he was nearly impossible to score off in the UAE. If you look at this, he's been replaced in the side by Arshdeep, who has been fantastic, but that's about a wash when you look at the conditions. Bhuvi was there last time, but it was a weird semi-fit, not informed Bhuvi. And who is the new informed Bhuvi going to be replacing in that old 11 anyway? It's going to be Jasprit Bumrah. I mean, no one loves Bhuvi more than I do, but let's be honest, he's not Bumrah. And Shami played in the last World Cup, and Shami's playing in this World Cup. Although you would say that he's slightly more favoured to these conditions, although the opposite could be said for all the spinners as well. Now, you could argue that this current team is more in form, and those things obviously really matter a lot. Kohli made 68 runs from 68 balls in the last tournament. So everything he's done here has been a big step up. But the team is actually weaker. It's missing its best bowler and perhaps its most important all-rounder. And one of the reasons I wanted to focus on India is because the reactions to them losing last time was so extreme. But the more I started thinking about this, it really wasn't just about one team. If you look at New Zealand, they are a very similar side to what happened last time. Their biggest change is Finn Allen, who's come in for Guptill, which based on the age curve would seem to be an update. Also, Glenn Phillips has clearly had a huge development spurt between those two tournaments. If they don't make the final this time, will it be seen as a disappointment? Probably. But all things considered, the two tournaments are going to be fairly similar for them. Pakistan is interesting because they had a slight regression in terms of talent, but then some other things have worked out well for them. But Shoaib Malik, Imad Wasim and Mohammad Hafiz is a pretty big trio to not bring from the last World Cup. Plus, Fakhar Zaman got injured midway through. And on paper, Iftikhar is not really a replacement. But the current model in Australia is doing exactly the Hafiz job. Shadab Khan faced 1 ball in the last tournament, so his usage has changed, even if he was available to them before. And quite obviously they've gone from a lot of spin to a lot of seam because the conditions have changed so much. Their spin was really good in the last tournament, and their seam has been really good here. Their real problem is form again. The two openers haven't made any runs, and that cost them the Zimbabwe game and also their reputation. But that last tournament, they were 5-0 and everyone was buzzing on them. This time, the form at the top and those two back-to-back losses really changed how we feel about them. England is almost entirely different, of course. Their team's been in such a state of flux because they've changed captains and they've also just had an incredible run of injuries. In that last tournament, Owen Morgan was scratching around on his way to retirement, Jason Roy was one of their openers, Bairstow was their middle order guy, and their bowling had Chris Jordan and Tamal Mills. This has all changed since then. Hales, Brook and Stokes are in for the batting, and Stokes has been doing obviously a little bit of bowling as well. Curran has replaced Mills as a death bowler, which doesn't make sense on paper but is completely working for them at the moment. Stokes gives them a flexibility that Morgan could never do. Hales and Roy is a bit more like a straight swap. And Brook for Bairstow is not an upgrade, but it should be pointed out that Bairstow didn't make any runs last time, and Brook is clearly a fantastic talent. That's the only team it's hard to get a really good grip on, just because over the 2 World Cups they've had 8 major injuries. In fact, 9 if Dawid Malan can't play again. But the reason I've been thinking about all this is because how this is such an interesting situation, because it's only 1 year on from the last World Cup. That's not how most of us grew up. And while there are obviously clear problems with having a World Cup every 12 months, it does allow us to realize that we probably overreacted to the last tournament, and we're probably doing the same again this time. This is how the teams have gone across the 2 World Cups altogether, which gives us a much better understanding of who is good or bad. Australia have gone 9-2 in this time, losing 1 game in each tournament. New Zealand and Pakistan are 8-3. Of course, that tie is about to be split. England and India are tied at 7-3, and that tie is about to be split. And then you have South Africa, who are 6-3. And just behind them is Sri Lanka on 9-7. And remember, if you just look at Sri Lanka in the main part of the tournament, they're actually 4-6. So it's very clear that we have a top 6 quality teams, Sri Lanka, and then the rest. But to win a World Cup, you need help from injuries, form, results, matchups, tosses, everything, because it's such an intense, short tournament. I think that what this shows is there's no one clear dominant team. But the other thing that I want you to get from this is, what I have shown you here is 2/3 of an IPL season. And it's about a completed season of most other T20 leagues. And yet, it's 2 World Cups. So currently, Australia are being told that they are un-Australian. And South Africa's the chokers now, and were previously unlucky. India and Pakistan were the chokers last time also. But if this was a league, Australia would be favourite to end up in the top 2, with pretty much all the other 5 teams varying chances of making the finals. But World Cups aren't leagues. They're wild compared to that. And we usually take the most extreme views possible on little more than 1 or 2 losses, or 3 or 4 wins. And it's usually the results that we look at, not even the games themselves. And if nothing else, having 2 World Cups back to back has shown us just how silly most of that reaction is.